Welcome back to BLOCKTV. It's time now for Cryptonomics. And with controversy swirling around the Libra project and a slew of new developments taking place in the ecosystem, we bring on regular contributor and crypto economist Yaniv Feldman to help us make sense of it all. Yaniv, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
All right, so it's been, I say, a bit of a tricky week for the Libra project as it stands now. Obviously, most notably, we had PayPal's decision to quit the association, making massive headlines. But there have been a few other things to name as well. Apple's CEO Tim Cook, coming out recently bashing not Libra directly, but the notion of private currencies conflicting with sovereign coins. We've had the EU saying they're going to go to the G20 and try and take action against Libra as a project, and a sort of backlash and a crackdown. What's the narrative that's being painted here? I mean, it doesn't look good for Libra based on these sort of actions alone.
Again, it depends on how you looked at it to begin with. Obviously, most of the things that happened this week are not a good development for Libra, but most of it was to be expected. I mean, from the regulatory perspective, we saw from like day zero that no one's going to take this down quietly. Right. We even saw, this week, Congress demanding to speak to Zuckerberg, right, and not any of his employees about Libra. The EU, on the one hand, we had France and Germany a couple of weeks ago. Even Japan going for regulation. Mm-hmm. So nothing here from the regulation perspective is new. What is a bit, I wouldn't say alarming, but disturbing, is to see that the pact that Facebook has created with the initial partners, the initial launching partners for Libra is starting to fall a little bit apart. Obviously, PayPal weren't the strongest player in this pact because they are a financial player and they're not as strong as Visa and MasterCard. And obviously, regulatory pressures have a bigger effect on them than other players. So it's likely that they were starting to see all the commotion around Libra and said, okay, you know what, we're pulling out for now. We're gonna let that slide a bit. We're gonna take the heat if that succeeds, and we won't be launching because we will be able to go back later on. But for now, we don't want to risk our current landscape, our current achievements in regulatory spaces. If you look at Visa and MasterCard, on the other hand, that are much bigger in that respect, they see that and say, okay, I want to see Switzerland says no more Visa here or no more MasterCard here. That's probably not going to happen. So they have a larger leeway. Even partners like Uber or Vodafone, these are not partners that have a lot at stake for joining something like that, in contrast to PayPal. So that is somewhat understandable. But again, I don't see anything that happened this week contributing or even taking some of the odds of that being launched, that from my perspective are still rather low.
Right. So then just to drill down a little bit on the PayPal decision, because you say, I mean, understandably, as you say, they do have more to risk and potentially maybe less to gain, but it was seen that PayPal particularly came into this project because they felt that they'd lost out in sort of developments like WeChat and whatnot in Asia, where there was this growth in the mobile payment sphere that they'd missed an opportunity to be part of or to take on themselves in any way, shape or form. This was supposed to be their way to get into the new economy and keep into this developing and innovative space. We've also heard reports, loosely last week, that Visa and MasterCard are not entirely comfortable with what's going on that's happening, in terms of the regulatory crackdown. As you say, they've got a little more power in the game, and so maybe they're not so swayed by individual regulations, but they're certainly not wary, to say the least, at least according to reporting that's emerging. I suppose I wonder, from Libra's perspective, they're set for this big meeting to be held on the 14th in Switzerland. How is Facebook going to go into that meeting and sort of rally the troops? Do you think there'll be a chance for them to do that there?
Obviously, I would say that would be the main part of the meeting, that and technical updates. Mm-hmm. But I think that their perspective would be, look at the conversation we're already having. A lot of the news that you're hearing from everyone is noise, which we expected to have. I think that they will share more about the regulatory conversations that they are having, not publicly. And again, because my prediction is that we're not going to see that actually launching, not in the current form. So I assume that they will update to the best of their abilities, see that, we are talking with regulators. There's nothing, meaningful that could happen to you as partners. We're still going ahead with the launch, even if not in schedule, just a little after. From the technical perspective, we know that they are keeping on the development. They did issue a few new updates this week about the pre-mainnet that they're going to launch.
As part of the roadmap statement that they put out.
Exactly. So they did a roadmap that does put them a little behind schedule, not much. So they are showing that they're not afraid of what's happening around them, and they will try to instill the same confidence with their partners.
Right. I mean, they're going to attempt to instill that confidence, and as you say, sort of moving on to that sort of technical side, they do have that pre-mainnet launch, and they do have some technical updates. So obviously moving beyond the regulatory, which perhaps is a little less in their control, or at least has more moving parts. From the technical side of things, what do you think this pre-mainnet, this roadmap that they put out, which as I say is a little delayed but still has a clear path, what does that signal to you?
So that signals to me that they were and still are very advanced, and they planned ahead, how it's going to work out. They didn't let the regulators stop them from developing, which, was what part of the regulators have asked. If you remember, they asked for an hiatus on all development of the product. So they didn't do that, and that's rather obvious. You do see the fact that they do have capable people in the Libra team that can deliver a good product. From at least the documentation that I've seen, it does look rather impressive from a technical perspective. And I think that, we never expected that the challenge for what they're trying to build would be on the technical standpoint. So in that respect, they're still where they're supposed to be.
Still where they're supposed to be, but I guess it does become an interesting question, how the landscape is going to shift around them in the period between now and into the future. And that brings me to the other major point, and the sort of elephant in the room that so many that regulators aren't necessarily talking about, that seem to be slipping through the radar, which is of course the Telegram Open Network, set to launch by October 31st at the latest. We're in October now, it's real, it's here. Emails have been sent out to early investors stating that they'll have their wallets up and running on the 16th. We've got hard deadlines, we've got these things coming out, and yet regulators time and again seem unwilling to deal with this, to talk about this, while Libra remains front and center. Firstly, is the comparison between the two fair? Because everyone makes the comparisons to social media sites, but they are taking quite different technological and fundamental approaches to their mechanisms. And then I guess, what to make of this? But maybe start with the first.
So you can compare apples and oranges because they're both fruits.
Exactly.
But Libra and Gram are something that are relatively different from each other. First off, there is the basis of the value for the currency, where in Libra it's a basket of currencies. It's actually backed by something, and is much more of a risk to existing economies, to existing monetary policies than any other crypto token, no matter who supports it. That is one of the major reasons, by the way, that I think that most regulators are, opening all their cannons against Facebook and are, I wouldn't say ignoring, because I do know that there are regulators that are discussing and are exploring Telegram Open Network and Gram Token, but it's not even in the same league in terms of attention given. I think that if you look at the technical perspective, even though both of them are meant to use as payments eventually, I think that the road taken by TON and by Libra is rather different as well. First off, TON builds on a Telegram application, even though it's Telegram open network and you can build anything you want on top of it. Even in Telegram today, you can take the client and build anything on top of it. It was pretty open source to begin with, but you're still building on top of something that has, a centralized entity. Even though Telegram did say that post-launch they won't be acting as administrators or validators of the network. By that, they're pretty much trying to open the slate up for big players to come and support the network. In Libra's case, what Facebook is saying is that Libra is the basis. We're going to let everyone build on top of that. Facebook is just going to be one of the things that's going to be using Libra and not the other way around. While in Ton, it looks like most of the things will be built on top of Telegram using Ton. Again, the user base is rather different, 200 million, 300 million against 2 billion. That's rather different. And I think that the play when compared to, if we're looking at Libra is really out there to try and disrupt the way global economy works today, both in terms of digitalization and the word of value preservation and transfer, while Ton goes for digitalization, but not for value transfer, but more of what trying to create an open source or a more decentralized version of what WeChat did in China. Which is hugely successful in Asia, and I think that if it goes half of what they hope for, could be highly successful in the rest of the world with Telegram as well.
But then I guess it comes back to attitudes towards it, and I want to bring back in a point that we made earlier, but to touch on a little deeper. So Apple CEO Tim Cook made some comments recently speaking with French financial newspapers saying, and I'll quote here, "I really think that a currency should stay in the hands of countries. I'm not comfortable with the idea of a private group setting up a competing currency. Rather. Now, Tim Cook is an interesting figure, obviously, not only because of his importance in the tech world, but also his association with the Trump administration and his sort of closeness with US administrative and regulatory officials. When he makes a statement like that, do you think that signals that perhaps the business world and the private world aren't ready for Libra either, or do you think this is the opinions of but one man?
No, I think it's the opinion of one man. I think Tim Cook is a very smart man. He understands a lot of things. Without being presumptuous, general macroeconomics is not something he deals with every day. He is entitled to his opinion about whether or not he thinks private money is good or not. I stand by him with that regards. Having said that, Libra is not exactly private money. Even Ton, with a lot of respects, is not exactly private money. And a lot of the projects and a lot of the tokens and a lot of the things that we see in the blockchain crypto world are not what you would call private. Every company that does an ICO, even besides the term that is already long gone, but every company that launches their tokens is basically a public company. And saying that taking out a currency is a matter of a public company or a state or a private company or a state. First off, there's a big difference. And second, we are entering to a phase where a public company's share and money are the same. Okay, and, Bitcoin is one thing, but look at Ton. We spoke earlier. Maybe you could take a gram token and buy an Amazon with it, or buy in your supermarket with it, if they decide that they support that. And what does that make Ton? It makes it some form of money. So and it doesn't work any better or less than money formed by a government. It will have its own effects, economically. Obviously, not sure that the entities or the governing bodies behind these crypto tokens, Ton or even Libra for that matter, would be able to assume, control, and govern, the economy behind a currency that well. like countries, or maybe they can do better. But in my opinion, one of the interesting things in decentralization is that a lot of things are more open towards the free market, meaning that supply and demand will actually be the one deciding, what's happening in a market. And again, to my opinion, it's much healthier because no one man or no one governing body knows better about what's good for the market than the market itself.
Certainly powerful words to end on there. Yaniv Feldman, I want to thank you so much for helping to break down this difficult, complex and multi-layered subject. There'll be so much still to come. Many more announcements from Libra, I'm sure, to be coming soon ahead. We'll be covering them all at BLOCKTV, so stay with us at blocktv.com for all the latest in news and information. I'm Asher Westrop Evans. Thanks for watching.
For more news and updates, follow us on Twitter.